Hey everybody, this is Eve West. Thank you for tuning in to my YouTube channel. This channel is ultimately dedicated to promoting a book I wrote. It's called Follow. It's an ebook. You can find it on Amazon.com under the Kindles tab. And my book deals with a holistic view of spirituality and looking at it not just from a purely psychological or what some people call quote-unquote spiritual, but I also focus on the physical, which is the reptilian brain, and that's what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so I really look at, those various topics that we're told we're shunned from talking about, like race, like sex and money and so forth. Typically, we're shunned from talking about these things in the Matrix, but they're very integral to who we are, just like those etheric aspects of who we are, like love, caring, and creativity, intuition, and those intangible aspects of who we are as human beings. And so I look at the contrasts of the Matrix, such as religion, media, entertainment. I look at education, the government structure, the familial structure, and how all of those actually work to disintegrate the mind, or split the mind, I should say. And so basically these constructs makes two yous. You have what we call an ego, which is a physical self that has to adhere to rules and laws and things like that. But you also have an astral self that you go to at night when you go to sleep. And so you pretty much leave your body and you work out the restrictions that you had in physicality. So that's your astral body. People refer to it as Isis and Ra, or they refer to the ego and the or the conscious and the unconscious mind as Adam and Eve in Christian theology. Basically, it's God and the devil. Freudian psychology calls it the id and the ego. And so there's basically two aspects of who you are. And so the reason why, I talk a little bit in the book about, or a lot I should say, not a little bit, but I talk a lot about a major polarization or discrepancy between my ego and my astral self. My ego is more angelic, nice and kind and so forth, but my astral self is, very evil and sadistic. And so the reason being is because I'm so restricted within my as an ego. And so the more and more I've woken up in the Matrix, the more and more I've become even more restricted, if you will. And so, that brings me pretty much to what I want to talk about in this video, which is gang stalking programming. Whenever you are starting to wake up to, knowledge, and you're starting to acquire a whole lot of knowledge that's being unlocked within your DNA, so to speak, you become what we call a divergent. And so you stick out. From the crowd energetically. It's not just based upon what you say or what you do, but just by your presence itself, it makes you stick out. And so, for example, my programming, religious programming, was Christianity. And so when you find out that Jesus, the occult meanings behind Jesus, and how Jesus is the Son of God, which is the solar plexus, solar meaning sun, and how your solar plexus is the root of your will and creativity. That's why when you see Jesus, oftentimes his heart is in chains, because your will is your desires, is your heart. And so when you see these occult meanings or what have you, and you start to share them with people who are around you, they start to become a handler, and so they point you out as a divergent. And so when you find out the letter J didn't exist during the time that Jesus would have walked the earth, and you were taught as a child that there's power in the name of Jesus, but that really wouldn't have been his name, then you bring this information to the people that you love, care about, family, friends, people, out and about, or what have you, then you become a divergent, and so you become an other. And so, the thing is that, oftentimes people say, oh, these are accusations, you're just saying things, you're talking crazy, what have you, but I do plan on going out within the community and actually, asking people at churches about a lot of the research I've done in the Bible, because, I've actually debunked a lot of esoteric knowledge within the Bible, and showing how the Bible, the reason why the Bible was given to slaves, slaves were given the Bible because the Bible really is monarch programming. That's why many of us go by the King James Version, because King James is a monarch. And so you see a lot of contradictions in the Bible. Whenever you're feeding contradictions into the mind, you're disintegrating the mind, you're destroying it, you're separating, you're causing separation. And so, when you're causing separation like that, it creates a slave mentality. And so it creates two yous, an ego and an astral self. And so that separation creates a lot of what we call crucifixion and cognitive dissonance when it's time to give up the mind and body. And so the thing is that I plan on going to these churches to prove that you know, whenever you start to wake up to occult knowledge found in the Bible and, you know, other facets of the matrix like media entertainment, things like that, then you really start to be pointed out as an other, and you find it very difficult to function within the matrix environment. And again, this goes into mark of the beast symbology. If you don't have the mark of the beast, then you know, you can't buy and sell within the garden. And so, you know, I've been gang stalked in so many different places, not just in, you know, the place I'm going to share with you in this video, but I've been gang stalked at jobs. I've been gang stalked at the airport, at the library. I've been gang stalked at department stores and grocery stores and everywhere within my home and dwelling. And so, you know, you're pointed out as an other because, you know, you have light or you have knowledge that actually goes beyond the physical world. And so it's very difficult for the body to hold that light and hold that knowledge and not break out of physicality and go to heaven, I should say. But the whole purpose is to bring heaven to earth so you can actually escape the wheel of rebirth and escape slavery. But as long as we keep going back and forth between the moon and the sun, or heaven and hell, so to speak, then, you know, we will continue to be looped within the reincarnation system. So I just want to put a lot of light on what's been happening with me lately. I did a gang stalking video maybe more than a month ago, maybe a few months ago, can't remember exactly, but I did a little while ago, I did a gang stalking video at a grocery store. And this is by far really the worst gang stalking video that I have footage of, because, you know, like I like to explain to people, gang stalking is intended to make someone look crazy. Gang stalking is intended to be very covert, not overt. It's intended to be very covert. There are little things that people do to get on your nerves. And so when you act what they call to be irrationally about it, say that person did this or said this or what have you, is meant to make you look like you're the one who's cuckoo, whatever, when this person is covertly doing things or what have you to piss you off. But, you know, this particular incident or whatever is so overt that I've decided to seek representation to fight it, because it disgusts me so. And it's tied to, like I said, an incident that I did a video of before. It was at a Piggly Wiggly grocery store. This video, or what have you, that I did a few months ago, it showed me going into, actually it was in April, it was April 26th actually, so it was almost 4 months ago. It was at a Piggly Wiggly grocery store, and I went into the grocery store. I was in the frozen section. I was looking at some ice cream, and the manager approached me, and he was like, what did he say? You know, he asked me to leave the store. He didn't give me a reason why. And so when I, you know, given that I'm always gang stalked a lot, I was on guard. I had my multiple cell phones, and so I turned on my iPhone, and I looked at my other cell phone, and I put it on my other cell phone. It was like a couple of minutes before closing. They closed at 11 o'clock. And so when I looked at my phone, I said, oh, you know, I said, well, I still have a couple of minutes left. He started to harass me, and at one point he says, you know, I'm asking you to leave, and that's what you need to do, or something like that. And so he wasn't really asking me, he was telling me. And so in a way, this is kind of cognitive dissonance and very psychological as well, because gang stalking is very psychological. You know, when you're saying I'm asking you to do something, but then but your demeanor and what you're doing, it goes against that and counteracts that, even your language counteracts that, then it looks very strange, you know, especially when it's decoded by the pineal gland or the third eye. To me, it looked very strange. And so I said, well, you know, I'm not going anywhere. You know, you're asking me, but I'm telling you that I'm not leaving. And so then he proceeded to call the authorities, or threatened to call the cops. That's what he told me he did. And so I was like, okay, well, that's fine. You can call the cops because I know I haven't done anything wrong. You know, he never gave a legitimate excuse for why he had to close the store early. And so as I walked toward the front of the store to wait on the cops, or what have you, he called me a bitch. And then he accused me of actually harassing him. And so I thought that this was strange. I was just like, okay, this is totally wrong. You know, I'm not being the bitch, he's being the bitch. And also he's the one who's harassing me and not even giving me a legitimate excuse for why, you know. And so, you know, I told him that I was not going to leave the store until 11 o'clock. So when 11 o'clock hit, I did leave the store to be in compliance with the store closing policy. But if you listen to the video, you will hear that when he actually does call the cops, he tells them that we're closed. So I don't believe that he disclosed to the police or the dispatcher that he asked me to leave the store prior to closing. So this insinuates that he did this to try to entrap me, so he could actually make justification that I did not leave the store before they closed. But anywho, whatever. So he told me when I was outside, you know, waiting, you know, he was closing up the store, and when I was outside waiting for the cops, they never came, but I saw him walking to his car. And so, you know, although he told me the cops are still coming, I don't have that on tape, but he did tell me that. So as he was walking to his car, you know, I told him, I said, listen, I'm gonna, you know, show your boss or what have you, show your manager what you did, how you mistreated me. And so he, what did he do? He started yelling all these obscenities at me, you know. I told him, I said, you know, he should get a WWJD bracelet, which is what Jesus do. And, you know, just to be cheeky, because I felt he'd call me a bitch and force me out the store early for no reason. I was very ticked off and upset. And so he, you know, when I told him he should get a WWJD bracelet, which is what Jesus do, he said, he told me that I'm a whore. He called me a whore that deserves to die. And then he told me that to shut the fuck up and all these things. It was very strange. You know, I don't know this person. You know, I didn't know this person prior to this incident. And so to have such a horrible emotions, if you will, come out as a result of this, you know, what took place, really, it really didn't make any logical sense to me. It didn't. You know, it kind of reminds me of those spoofs that people do of people who have like Tourette's or what have you. Like you've seen on those little spoof movies where they'll make fun of people and they're like, you know, people, they start yelling obscenities and just like saying things like shit, damn, you know, whatever. It seemed like that was the case with him. Like he just started like just like threw up on me. And, you know, I said to myself, this is strange. Do you know me? Do I know you? You know, and so it goes to show that, you know, whenever you're vibrating higher, that things go beyond the superficial. And so really, when he called me a whore, and also I didn't get this on video, but he also called me a classy, what did he call me? I think he called me a classy bitch or something like that. And so, you know, a whore is not classy. But when I thought about programming and how black women are portrayed on television, right, especially, black women are portrayed in very polarized ways. We're either very whorish and sluts, you know, and bitches, or we are what you would call classy. You know, we cannot find companionship, and so we're very educated, and you know, we're very wealthy oftentimes and so forth, but we can't, you know, really find companionship. And so I said to myself, you know, this is how he views me in terms of his programming. He doesn't really know me superficially. He doesn't really know me, but this is how I'm portrayed as a black woman on television. And so this is how he sees me. And so it was very eye-opening. And, you know, really, I did have a lot of detachment and dissociation in a way within the incident, because I knew that it was not him talking, that it was his programming talking. Because I've done a lot of research involving programming in the Matrix, and, you know, my gang stalking or what have you, I often refer to gang stalking as racial profiling. And a lot of my gang stalking videos, you know, I'm being racially profiled by other black people. And so people are like, well, how can you, you know, I'm sure people will say, how can you consider, you know, your gang stalking racial profiling? you know, when you have other black people who are targeting you. But people really need to understand that the programming doesn't just affect other racial demographics like white people, but the programming also affects black people. Like when I opened my third eye, or when my third eye was opened from the astral, and when I saw a lot of self-hatred towards black people, myself as a black woman and black people, I really didn't know where this came from. You know, I said to myself, you know, I never really, well, I'm just like everybody else in the Matrix. I always, you know, was raised to believe, you know, well, I wasn't raised to believe, but I always felt like race didn't matter. You know, I always was like, you know, it doesn't matter what race is, you know, we're all the same. We all bleed red. You know, I always felt, you know, beauty is beauty. You know, I felt there were beautiful white people just like there were beautiful black people and beautiful Asian people. I felt there were beautiful, you know, there was ugly black people like there were ugly white people and ugly Asian people to me. You know, it really didn't matter. But when my third eye opened and I saw how much hatred I had for black people and black women in particular as well, I said to myself, where'd this come from? And it's all programming. This is how black women are portrayed. And so the unconscious mind is different than your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is only designed to catch a fraction of information. You don't catch everything. The beta brainwave frequency of the ego is very chaotic. However, when you are, you know, because everything goes into your unconscious, so what you saw you didn't see, and what you heard you didn't hear, or what you felt you didn't feel, what you smelled you didn't smell, you know, all your senses, everything is taken into the unconscious. So when these things are brought to the forefront and you actually see what you didn't see or hear what you didn't hear, you really come to discover how you've been programmed to hate yourself. And so, you know, this was a travesty to me, and I really experienced what we would call crucifixion from Christian theology, or what you would call from Freudian psychology, cognitive dissonance. Because cognitive dissonance is when your mind houses two different cognitions. So Adam and Eve are split. And so one cognition, which is this angelic ego that speaks in front of you, you know, it's like, oh, you know, I really don't see race. We all believe red, yada, yada, yada. A beautiful, you know, person that is a different race is, oh, you know, I see beautiful and ugly people in races, and so it doesn't matter to me. But the unconscious is like, every time I see black people on TV, they're arrested, you know, their pants is falling off their behinds, you know, black men don't take care of their children, you know, oftentimes, like even on TV, you know, like even black women that are considered to be quote unquote prestigious are whores, like what is it, Kerry Washington on Scandal. You know, people like Kerry Washington is so wonderful. She's so smart and she's well dressed and poised and well spoken. However, she's still sleeping with a married man. She's a whore. And so all of that, you know, although my ego doesn't catch that, the unconscious does. And so all of that is programmed within the mind. And that comes to the forefront. This is programming. That's why they tell you with your media and entertainment, whenever you see like a TV, you know, when something's on TV, it says your program will, you know, begin now. It is literally a program. It's programming your mind. And so it created a lot of cognitive dissonance because, like I said, I'm two people. The ego aspect of me is not like this. The ego aspect of me doesn't care about race, but the unconscious aspect of me sees black people in a very poor light because of the type of programming that's been disseminated into the unconscious, subliminally into the unconscious mind. And so, you know, I had to keep this in mind in dealing with this person that I dealt with at the Piggly Wiggly. I'm going to actually repost that video so you can see and look at it for yourself. And, you know, I really did not deserve the treatment that I got, being called a whore, being told that I'm you know, a bitch, and, you know, I'm a whore that deserves to die and to shut the fuck up and so forth. Really was like, dude, what's wrong with you? Like, you really literally look like there's something wrong with you. You know, like, I really wanted to make something up so it would look better. I'm like, well, maybe I met him somewhere, and it's like, no. You know what I mean? It's like, I really wanted to justify, like, you know, people respond to people in different ways for different reasons. Like, if you're in a car accident and someone hits your new car or something like that, you may say things like that to them, like, you know, you bitch, or you may say what he said, you know, you're a whore that deserves to die. Then I'd be like, oh, I hit your car. That's why I'm a bitch and I'm a whore that deserves to die. yes, you know. But it wasn't like that. It was, I'm just going to randomly tell you these things, you know, pretty much that I hate you. And it was very hateful. And it was for no reason. And that didn't really sit well with me. You know, displaced emotions, if you will, don't sit very well with me, because I feel like when there's a root to something, you can always get to the bottom of it. You know what I mean? But when you have someone that just hates you just to hate you, you know, and they've been programmed just to do that, then that really is what I would call very alien and demonic and crazy. Really, to be honest with you, he looked crazy to me. So it really was disheartening to where you know, I went back to this establishment and something similar happened again. And you may ask yourself, why'd you go back to the establishment? You know, but when I spoke to the owner, because I spoke to the owner after the first incident, he told me that the guy would likely be fired. And, you know, I didn't really care too much about him being fired, but I really wanted to talk to this guy because I wanted to get to the root of why he was saying these things to me. You know, I felt that that would have been more of a justice, you know, serving me justice of actually being able to speak to him than for him to get fired, because he's just a little, you know, regular manager at the Piggly Wiggly. He can go to another store, superficially go to another store and get another job, you know, as a manager or whatever the case is. And so, you know, to me, it wasn't like he was the CEO of, you know, Bentley or something like that. To where it really would hurt him to lose this particular job. And so I felt like, you know, since you're calling me a whore and a bitch and all this stuff, then you should be able to sit in front of me and look me in the eye and to tell me why you're doing this. And even in the video, you'll see he's just walking away from his car. To his car, walking away to his car. And when I tell him to come to my face to really say all of these things, he can't do it. He drives away. And so he's very much a coward, very cowardly. And so, you know, I feel like if you're going to act like a boss, then be one and sit in front of me and actually, you know, say your stuff and be a G about it. So, you know, but, you know, the manager told me that that guy would likely be fired. And I said to myself, okay, even with the manager, you know, although, you know, he told me that the guy would be fired, I really did pick up I didn't really pick up a great vibe from the manager, the real manager, or the store owner, I should say. You know, he was just like saying things to me like, why are you telling me 3 days later or whatever the case is about this? And I was like, well, I wanted to really think about the situation before coming to you, because, you know, things that happen in the heat of the moment, you want to give them time, the dust to settle, you know. And so I really wanted to think about and meditate on it or what have you before bringing it to him. But he all of a sudden, you know, he didn't say, oh, you know, I apologize for that happening to you at first. He was just like, well, accusing me, why are you just coming to me now about this and this and the other? I thought that was insane, which, you know, kind of gives validity to the notion of the types of people that he does hire at his establishment. But, you know, I figured the guy likely was fired, and, you know, it was convenient for me to be there, you know, where the Piggly Wiggly was. So I said, okay, well, you know what, I'll go in there, give Piggly Wiggly another chance, whatever the case is. And so a similar incident happened. So I went in again through the frozen section, because that's the first section you get to. So I went into the frozen section and I was like, okay, I have to use the restroom. So I went to the restroom, and as I was walking out the restroom, the manager was right there. As I walked past the threshold of the door, the threshold or whatever of the place that houses the restrooms, and he said, are you finding everything okay? And I told him no. I wasn't finding everything okay because the bathroom was dirty. It was dirty, actually. And someone had written something on the stall to say that it was disgusting or something like that. And so, you know, I was like, no, you know, your bathroom is dirty. And so as I was walking away, I noticed that he was following me. So when I felt him following me, I turned around and I asked him, I said, are you following me? And he told me, yeah, he was following me, and he mentioned something about my purse. And so, you know, I said, okay. He was like, he said, are you planning on buying something here? And, you know, right then I noticed that I was being harassed. And so I said, you know, I'm going to start taping this. So I turned on my iPhone, you know, and I started taping him. And so before I told him I said, you know, I'm going to start taping you, he was like, he said, I'm gonna call the cops. he said, I'm gonna call the cops. And so I was like, okay. I was like, well, you can go ahead and call the cops. You know, I'm gonna tape you. And I started taping him. And that's when he proceeded to call the cops. And so, you know, when he called the cops, as I'm sitting there, you know, with my iPhone on him, you know, taping him, I mean, he tells the dispatcher that I'm cussing him and that I am, you know, giving him an attitude, what have you. And I'm silent. When you first see this footage, you'll see that I'm not saying anything to him at this point. And I was not cussing him. That was a lie. You know, I've always been taught that cussing is bad. So even, especially in public places, I deal with situations in a more, I guess you would say, superficial, you know, egoic, I guess you would say, I don't know, you know, kind of professional, kind of sort of cordial, right? Cordial way. And so, you know, I knew this was a lie. And so I was like, well, no, I said, I didn't, you know, I didn't have an attitude with you. I just told you that your bathroom was dirty, you know, which it is. And, you know, he continued talking to the person on the phone. And so I was like, whatever. And he said, he's like, the cops, what is it? I told him, I said, he could call the cops or what have you, because, you know, I said to myself, I haven't done anything wrong. This doesn't make any sense. And so he said, well, the cops are coming. And so I said, well, you know, that's fine. He said, well, I'm closing at 11. And so remembering the first incident that happened, because although that first manager that I dealt with, that first incident that happened in April, he told me that the cops were coming, but he left and they never came. And so, you know, I told this manager I didn't care, that I was going to stay there and wait, because, you know, I knew that with the last incident that, you know, the manager left at 11 o'clock or, you know, after the store was closed, I should say, after closing. And so, you know, I was like, you know, this is just really just stupid. The same thing happening over and over and over again. And so, you know, once the manager got off the phone with the dispatcher, I put him on my iPhone. I said, okay. I asked him, I said, why are you really asking me to leave here? Why are you really asking me? I said, you know, did you mention anything about my bag? And I don't believe, I looked at the video, you know, multiple times, and, you know, I'm curious to pull the tape from the dispatcher, because he at no time on the tape says, you know, I'm following you because your bag is, you know, I followed this person because her bag is big. I followed her out the restroom. He doesn't disclose this to the dispatcher. He just tells the dispatcher that I'm cussing him and that I'm having an attitude or what have you. And so this is clearly an indication that, you know, he is, you know, trying to paint a picture of me being a certain way. And not only that, but, you know, he's not really giving all the details. And so a lot of gang stalking deals with omissions of the truth. And so, you know, because I started interrogating him on tape, and then he leaves and goes into the back of the store. And so, because it's ironic for me, I walk away and I'm like, this is just great, you know? And so there's an employee at the front of the store that I started talking to, and I told her that this is not the first time that I've been disenfranchised at this particular store. And so as I'm talking to her, he came out the back by that point, so he pops up and he starts, you know, when I told her that he was stalking me out the restroom, she starts to laugh. And so I was like, whatever. You can tell by the inflection of my voice that I'm very upset. And by this time, the police officer comes in. And so, you know, when the police officer comes in, you know, I explained to him that this was not the only time that I had, you know, been basically disenfranchised at this particular business. And I told him that I had spoken to the owner about it, and I couldn't remember the owner's name, because I remember when I met with the owner, he didn't have a business card. And so knowing that the manager would know the owner, because he has an office in the back of the store, so I was like, you know, what's the name of the owner? And the manager says, I don't know. And so I was like, you don't know the owner? And so he says, I know, but I'm not going to tell you. So he lies to me in front of the police officer. And I believe since the police officer caught this, he was like, you know what? Let's go outside to talk. So the police officer, you know, is trying to get me outside to talk to me out there. And the police officer's like, oh, these guys, you know, they work so hard and they're just ready to go home, whatever, trying to kind of, you know, smooth out the situation. But for me, from my point of view, it wasn't anything that could be smoothed out at all. You know, this is now the second time you lied to me right in front of the police officer, and, you know, based upon my footage, you have not told the dispatcher, you know, that you know, were stalking me, following me out the restroom and telling me about my bag. And so, you know, as the police officer and I are walking to go outside to talk, the manager, you know, confesses and basically tells the police officer I did follow her, and I asked her about her big bag, if you will. And so he said, I just asked her, you know, if she was finding everything okay, and I was following her because of her bag, what have you. And so he does disclose this to the police officer. And so really I knew at this point, because I'm a human lie detector at this point. At this point, I'm a human lie detector. Whenever your pineal gland opens, you are a lie detector. And so you know, when he says to the manager that he followed me because of my bag, knowing that this is not true because I don't have a big bag, I asked him, I said, do you want to check my bag? You know, do you want to check my bag? And so he's like, I don't want to check your bag. I want you to get out the door. And so they basically rush me out the door, and that's when the police officer talks to me about various ways to, I guess you would say, you know, report being mistreated at, you know, the establishment or what have you. But, you know, the thing is that it really ticks me off and it makes me angry. And that's the whole point of gang stalking, to make you emotionally upset. It really ticks me off for people to just blatantly lie, you know, just blatantly lie in front of my face, lie in front of the authorities, to just, you know, lie. Like, for example, if I show you the bag that I had. This is the bag that I had at the store. Now, this is not a big bag. Would you consider this to be a big bag? Like, this is not like a suitcase or something like that. This is a normal standard bag. So I'm trying to figure out, how is it that this bag is considered to be a big bag and that's why you followed me out the store? This makes no common sense whatsoever. This is a lie. Okay? So I am purposely being targeted, you know, and then the rationales that are given for why I'm being targeted are bogus. And so, you know, and pretty much the fact that the manager said that he did not want my bag checked, and the fact that, you know, after all, and the fact that, you know, he just wanted me to get out the door, really signified that he didn't want me there. It's a problem with me. So what is it? You know, you didn't know me prior to this incident. Even the last incident with the manager, he didn't even know me prior to this incident. The only thing that he knows is my appearance. And so based on what I was dressed, how I was dressed, it was comparable to any other customer that would shop at the establishment. So the only thing you know about me is the way I'm dressed, my gender, and my race. That's it. That's all you know. Okay? So, this is clearly a case in terms of discrimination. I've been discriminated against because of my appearance, because of my race, my gender, and, you know, how I'm dressed. Those are the only things, only I would say, you know, aspects of me that you could have been judging me for, you know, besides, really that's the only thing you could have been judging me for, because you don't know me. Superficially, you don't know me and I don't know you. And so that's why I've decided to really fight this one. You know, I let the first one slide, and the first one is actually worse than this particular incident that happened August 11th. But, you know, I said to myself, you know, this is just not covert. Gang stalking is very covert, but this one was very overt. And I feel that since it's so overt that, you know, I've decided to contact multiple attorneys with the videos I've had and the explanations for all the videos that I've, you know, the documentation I've taken of the events. I have emailed the major local, news stations, my story. You know, I have, you know, I really don't want to contact the owner myself, so I actually asked a representative of the Piggly Wiggly to contact the owner for me, which she said that she emailed him, and she what is it? She emailed and she called and left a message. I have yet to hear from him since August 15th. Although, but the first incident, he told me, he chastised me for waiting 3 days or so to speak to him. But I haven't heard from him, you know, since 3 days or what have you. So, you know, that this is very, I guess what you would say, disheartening. This is very disheartening that I've been treated this way, and that I'm experiencing such what I would call quote unquote excommunication for no reason, and no one has the, you know, I guess what you would call the balls to sit in my face to really explain to me, you know, why this is happening. You know, one thing about, you know, demons can only exist in the dark, but I am the light, and so they run away and they scurry away like the Dickens. You know what I mean? And so, you know, this is just very this is just mind-boggling to me. It's really crazy to now have experienced this type of treatment now twice. You know, I wasn't called a derogatory name, but clearly lied to in front of the police officer and made to feel like I'm a second-class citizen. And you know, I really want to get down to the bottom of it, and so I'm really curious to see what comes of the fact of, you know, contacting all these civil suit attorneys, civil rights attorneys, contacting the news stations, putting this on YouTube. I'm going to look into other media outlets as well, like Facebook and things like that. I normally don't do Facebook anymore, but I feel that the incident is so overt at this point that doing Facebook would be would also be something, if you will, to kind of put light and shed light on what has occurred. Because, you know, I feel that with certain things like this, you can't cover it up. You know what I mean? You're shape-shifting. You're shape-shifting out there, and so since you can't cover it up, you know, then it's only a matter of when we're going to actually sit down and talk about this and rectify the situation. So, you know, I just want to put light on this, guys. I'm going to put the most recent incident that happened August 11th, and I'm going to put repost the incident that happened April 26th, just so you can get an idea holistically together of how these incidents kind of, you know, tie into one another and how they're both examples of discrimination. So, you know, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you in my next video.